I think microphone, yes. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to this session. This session talks about the Space and Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So I'm Chiaki Mukai from Japanese Space Agency, your moderator of this session. Space activities will contribute to create a better society by advancing technologies and knowledges. Many spin-offs from space research and technology can be expected to dedicate life on Earth and support SDGs. Because originally, we are the ones who think about the exploration from Earth to space. At the same time, we also have to think how we can contribute to the people living on Earth. So this session will learn about the SDGs and our contribution to the SDGs. On September 25th, 2015, countries adopted a set of 17 goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all as part of a new Sustainable Development agenda. So, we have only 1 hour, but we have a wonderful speakers with us today. And they will give us a perspective about the SDGs and how we can contribute to the SDGs. So we have Dr. Ashbahar from ESA and Agrabel from GPSD, which is a global partnership for sustainable development data, and Dr. Allen from NASA, Dr. Kibe from JAXA, Japanese Space Agency, and Dr. Minton from Geoscience Australia, and Dr. Del Rio Vera from United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, so-called UNOSA. So I think I would like to invite the first speaker, which is basically, if you agree, this is the order of the speakers, so Dr. Ashbahar. Now you have the floor.
If this is working, I'll stand here, so it is here. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chiaki-san, for the introduction. I will be fast, so to allow a bit also time for debate. So very quickly, UN Sustainable Development Goals, you know them, I'm not going into those. Maybe just to say that there's a lot which can be done with Earth observation. We have been analyzing the various targets and indicators and identified a large number where Earth observation can contribute a vast amount of information, if not the significant part of it. And this is well known and this is well understood. So this is really an important aspect of this activity. So what we do in concrete terms, here's just a few examples, a few points which illustrate this. We have been actually initiating within ESA already some years ago, 2010, activities, projects where we focus on the use of Earth observation data for sustainable development, and of course sustainable development leads to sustainable development goals support. We have also signed with the ADB and the World Bank formal agreements how to support them and their requirements in terms of policy needs. They are being implemented. You see here on this world map some of the activities which we do with these organizations. These are individual projects, and you see they are well distributed over different parts of the globe. Very important, we are not doing this in isolation. We are very closely working in the international context, both on the GEO side. GEO is the Group on Earth Observation based in Geneva, but working, of course, as a global entity, and also with CEOS, which is the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, which provides the space answers to the societal questions which are being addressed by GEO. And this is a very well-defined, a very well-working group, and just to say that if we are addressing from space the SDGs, of course, this has to be done in a very coordinated manner, because one agency can never supply all the data. It needs a concerted effort, and I see colleagues here on stage from different agencies, and this really, I would like to underline that this is done in a concerted manner. Just one example I would like to show that this is really working. What you see here is a feature story of the World Bank, which just came out very recently, which does show that the engagement which we have made in this domain, and also with the World Bank in particular, is paying off in terms of being recognized by the World Bank as an important partner to help them implementing the Sustainable Development initiatives. And this is just published on the 23rd of August, just to underline these activities. What we do what we can offer in order to support that is our network of satellites, which we are developing. What you see here, some of them which are launched already and which are running. We have 11 satellites at the moment in operation, but we have 28 in development, and this is the largest number ever which in ESA we have in terms of satellites being developed in the various domains, for meteorology, for Copernicus, for science, but the mix of those, or the use of all those together, of course, for the SDGs provides a major asset, a major information tool which can be used for this purpose. And this was my very short introduction. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I forgot to tell you, actually you have already have some handout, and which has the speakers more information in detail, and also the questionnaire sheet. So whoever who have a comment or questions, please write it down during the while speakers are speaking. And the Q&A session will be the last, and after finishing everybody's presentation. So thank you. So please, I would like to invite the next speaker, Dr. Agrawal. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First, let me just start by thanking Jackson for this invitation. I really appreciate it. It's not very often that I get to speak to an astronaut, so that's just really cool with all the panelists. So I work for an organization called the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We've already spoken a little bit about the SDGs, that there's 17 goals, 169 targets, and 230 indicators, which is still fluctuating a little bit. But I think what that's really demonstrating is that there's huge data needs behind the SDGs, and every country in the world arguably is not well positioned to be able to address all of them. And so what the Global Partnership is trying to do is work with all the champions that are already out in the field, trying to address the SDGs from data and technology and capacity and financial issues type of a perspective. Right now there's over 250 organizations that are involved in the Global Partnership across all those different sectors. And what we're really trying to do is focus on what's the demand that's happening at the country level. Trying to better understand how the SDGs are aligning to national development priorities, where are the major data gaps, and in the context of the data revolution, how can new sources of data come to bear to really help them achieve the SDGs and bring different data communities together when we're thinking about SDGs being implemented within national statistics from a reporting and monitoring perspective, and how data can actually be used for action and decision making. So what's happening at the country level is that many countries are taking the SDGs and really aligning them to their national development priorities. And from that perspective, really coming out with a localized contextual framework for how the SDGs can be best applied. And really, again, thinking about how this data can be used for action, not just for reporting and monitoring, which is important, but you have to have the feedback loop with that in order to show how that data can then really guide decisions at multiple levels, trying to get whole of government approach and a multi-stakeholder approach where you have governments, private sector, and civil society working together. And so through that process, one of the consistent issues that we've found across our countries, there's a number of them, but one that I'll speak to now is how does geospatial and Earth observation data apply to the SDGs? And so I'd like to thank NASA for all the tremendous work that they've been doing with the Global Partnership, as well as the group on Earth observations. What we're trying to do now is for a number of methods that are being developed or have been developed, really trying to pilot those now at the country level to really meet those specific challenges. So in this particular case, we're working with Colombia, who's arguably one of the most advanced countries in response to the SDGs, but a number of the issues that were highlighted in the first slide are issues that Colombia is also facing in terms of how they can address some of the gaps around urban resilience, water resources, deforestation, land use, and land cover. I was also at the UN General Assembly meeting last week where we had an opportunity to have more one-on-one engagement with the countries that we're working with, and came out with a number of other issues that countries are facing, mostly around in the next few years, within the next 3 years, many countries are going to be engaged in developing their population censuses and agricultural censuses. So what we're trying to now think about is how data cubes can be applied, how Earth observation data can be applied to get at information that supports national development planning, but then also gets more dynamic information down to the individual so better decisions can be made around crops and so forth. From a partnership perspective, we're trying to use all the learnings that are happening at the country level and from our partners to bring this all together through resources and best practices and guidelines that can be made available to countries. Ultimately, what we want to be able to do is also create a data infrastructure where we can connect with other partners and make that relevant data more accessible such that you're able to empower a developer community to create apps and visualizations around the data, but then also to take the methods that are being applied through connections to those data, make it accessible, and then hopefully scale those approaches across countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the data, the process and access information. So now we would like to invite Dr. Allen to the podium.
Thank you very much, and greetings. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And as I speak to you about the various Earth missions, because I'm going to be talking more about what NASA does as far as capability with our partnerships. As I do that, you'll see some of the graphics for some of the images of results of the data that'll be looping through in the background, I hope. Because I think that a picture's worth 1,000 words, but I don't see it looping, so this could be. There we go. Examples of them and the importance of what the data mean. So for more than 5 decades, NASA has used the vantage point of space to understand and explore our home planet, improve life here on Earth, and safeguard our future. NASA's observations on Earth's complex natural environment are critical to understanding how our planet and natural resources and climate are changing now and can change in the future. NASA makes Earth observations free and openly available to those seeking solutions to important global issues such as preserving and managing natural resources, climate change, food security, and human health. I want to begin with the A-Train. NASA and its international partners operate several Earth observation satellites that closely follow one after another along the same orbital track. This coordinated group of satellites constituting a significant subset of NASA's current operating mission, major satellites, and is called the Afternoon Constellation, or the A-Train for short. The satellites are in polar orbit, crossing the equator northbound at about 1:30 p.m. local time, within seconds to minutes of each other. That allows near simultaneous operations and observations of a wide variety of parameters to aid the scientific community in advancing our knowledge of the Earth system science and applying this knowledge for the benefit of society. 6 satellites currently fly in the A-Train: the Orbiting Corbin Observatory, the Global Change Observation Mission, Aqua, Calypso, CloudSat, and Aurora. I also want to mention a few other missions that contribute to the body of scientific knowledge of the planet we inhabit. The Global Flood Monitoring System is a U.S.-funded project that uses the Tropical Rainfall Measurement Mission, TRIM, and the Global Precipitation Monitor, GPM data. It is on a 3-hour time scale and forecast out to 5 years. It is used by the Red Cross and the UN World Program to monitor flooding and landslide prediction. NASA's Earth Observatory can be used to monitor refugee migrations. The Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Onboard Reflection Radiometer, ASTER, an imaging instrument onboard the Terra satellite, has been used to capture growth over a 4-year period at the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. The population increased by 130,000 refugees between 2009 and 2013. SERVIR, meaning to serve, is a joint development initiative of NASA and the U.S. Agency for International Development. It has been very effective in aiding in countries in capacity development. One example of its use is by the World Food Bank that uses a SERVIR satellite-based agricultural monitoring tool to determine the worst affected areas in western Nepal so they can prioritize food distribution. SERVIR data are also used in that area to monitor frost damage on tea and coffee crops. And Landsat is the longest continuous space-based survey of the Earth's surface. Over the 40 years of history that the 8 spacecraft have been designed, built, and launched into space, and Landsat 9 will be launching in 2020. Before and after images can be captured, and examples are shown for lava flow, volcanic plumes, heat from fires and forest fire tracking, flood damage, agricultural land use, and land cover changes. It can also be used for monitoring endangered species and wildlife habitat, detecting and trafficking toxic blooms, and to monitor the effects of urban growth on water and air. These are just a few of examples of the data that are being collected by the satellites that are orbiting our Earth. And I wanted to mention that this is totally in collaboration with some other federal agencies within the U.S., obviously with some of the commercial companies within the United States, such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic. And then also we work closely with the United Nations World Food Program, the UN COPIUS, and UN Office of Outer Space Affairs. Not to leave out our other space agency partners, the European Space Agency, Japan, Russia, Canada, Brazil, and India. So I just want to mention really quickly what this relates to this Sustainable Development Goals. So for SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 2, zero hunger, our agriculture and water management apply. For SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, we have the water management and the refugee migration. For SDG 11, sustainable city and communities by monitoring urban sprawl and conducting urban planning. SDG 13, climate action. The A-train and other assets are critical to understanding changes in weather and climate. And finally, SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. None of the Earth data we have would be achievable without the vast number of domestic and foreign collaborations and partnerships. Many other capabilities apply to the SDGs, but in summary, I just want to say that NASA is committed to continuation of Earth science missions and collaboration to better understand and protect the planet that we live on. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
So thank you very much about the NASA's situation for the situation. And I would like to invite Dr. Kibe to the podium.
Thank you, Mukai-san. Yes, my name is Kibe from JAXA, and I would like to make my address from a specific, rather specific point of view on education, based on my personal experience. Okay. Yes, and when it comes to the relation between the space and education, there are two, roughly speaking, I believe that it is divided or classified into two cases, two categories. And one is education using the space asset. The other is education on space technology, science and technology. Okay, the first point, the education using a space asset. Of course, it includes the distance learning and e-learning. So we are now facing with digital divide issues. But fortunately, emerging of mega constellations provide us with very, very nice tools and platforms for these objectives. But you know that the space debris issue, we have to take care of this carefully. Otherwise, we will have very, very dreadful result. And example on the SSA and the collision avoidance and the disposal strategy, active removal of ground safety or something like that. Yes, my original major is in this field. Then we are discussing very actively and to solve these issues. Next one, education on space science and technology. You know, before moving on to the second category, I would like to discuss the motivation for support for developing countries shortly. And my basic question is like this: why are we motivated to support developing countries? Someone said it is political, someone said it is business, someone might say humanitarian aid. But I would like to, yes, the motivation might be very dependent on the position of each individual. And these are maybe, so to speak, a near-term motivation. But I would like to share with all of you the long-term motivation, like we should support them to grow up to be our dear equal partner to expand the space development activity by mankind drastically in the long run. With their participation, I mean developing countries, and maybe we will be able to expand our activity, space development activity drastically. So that means support to developing countries is not only for the people in developing countries, but also us and the people in the developed country. That's my point. Yes, and move on to the education of space science and technology. Okay, just before coming here, I made an investigation about the situation in every countries in the Southeast Asian area. And I found that the situation about space development and education is different from country to country. So it is very important. We should offer the support and complying with the status of each countries. And maybe the point is, yes, urgent needs of them is the most important issue and point. And the satellite development experience, even though it is small or not. And space-related budget of that country and is another point. And whether they have a space agency or not is one point. And the domestic education system. So, and we have to consider carefully and to support and complying with the status of each country. You know that this is not an exclusive list, but we have a lot of tools, possible tools for support. And then we have to select the proper offer to them. And among them, I would like to emphasize the importance of the UN role of the UN Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education. Today, we are very happy to have a representative for UNEUSA. Maybe if you want, and he or I will give you a detailed explanation later. So, as a concluding remarks, and I would like to propose 3 points. And I would like to share this long-term vision with you. That's the first one. And the second one is let's keep watching the progress of the SDG initiative and discussing possible contribution from the space community and fully utilizing every opportunity such as this ISE or the IF Global Conference, UNIF workshop, and etc. Third one, last but not least, and this chart shows the distribution of the past ISE. You know that you can easily find that there has been no ISEs in the Southeast Asian area. Okay? ISE is the most suitable occasion for people in the developing countries to get in touch with the world, cutting-edge advanced space development activities, and for us and people from the developed country to know the situation and actual needs in that region on the SDG initiative. Okay, and my last proposal is let's encourage the Southeast Asian people to host an IAC in very near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much about the dedication to the education. Now, the floor is yours, Dr. Min-Chen.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to be very quick again. What I'd like to talk about is that in order to measure the SDGs effectively, we need to be able to measure change. That's what we're trying to track with the SDGs, positive change. And in order to do that, we need to be able to measure everywhere in space and everywhere in time. And that requires temporal, spatial information. And what I'm going to show you is a couple of examples of how we've managed to do that across the Australian continent and how that can be potentially applied globally. So we've been measuring the Earth from satellite for about 40 years, right? So we have a lot of data temporally already. And what we've done in Australia is taken that 40 years of historical data across the Australian continent, and we've calibrated, ortho-rectified, cloud masked, atmospherically corrected it, and stacked it up through time so that we can actually look at that entire period of the last 40 years through time and see how things have changed across the Australian continent. Two things I'm going to show you that relate to the SDGs are how we've used this to track where and when water has occurred on the surface of the Australian continent, and secondly, how we've used it to track water quality. So this is a map of the frequency with which we've seen water across Australia, and one of our key SDG indicators is the extent of water-related ecosystems on the surface of the planet. So what you're seeing here is the frequency with which we've seen water over the last 30 years. In blue are places where it's been wet for most of that 30-year period. In green are places that it's been wet some of the time, and in orange and red are places where it's only been wet for one or two times in a flood situation during that period. And we have this layer that we've generated out of this data cube capability across the entire continent. You can zoom into any part of Australia and click on an individual pixel, and it will tell you how often we've observed that pixel in that 30-year period, 527 times in this case. How often we've detected water in that pixel, 87 times. So in this case, the pixel I've clicked on has only been wet 16% of the time. We can also show you when that wetness occurred. So you can see in red is when it was dry, and in blue when it was wet. So this can tell you for every part of Australia when it's been flooded, how often that wetland has been wet, when water storages have been put in place, and how the water has progressed. So this is something that could be done globally. The second example is water quality. So what we're looking at here is the lake in our national capital, Lake Burley-Griffin, you can see there. On the right-hand side of the graph is the top end of the lake, and on the left-hand side of the graph is the bottom end of the lake. We've got time on the Y dimension, and colour is water quality. So red is bad, blue is good. Let's see how this lake has changed over 30 years of history. In the early years, very bad water quality all the way down the length of that lake. But in around 2000, there was a big change and a big improvement in water quality due to a lot of policy action by the government of the time to clean up the inflows to that lake. So what you're seeing here is the footprint of policy change in this lake, but we can generate this for every lake on the continent, every single water body. And potentially, what's exciting is we could do this for every water body on the globe, because this data already exists. It's already there. We've been monitoring the world for the last 40 years. We have the data. Packaging it in this way and generating these kind of products could give us the basis to measure these Sustainable Development Goals objectively across the whole world. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So the last speaker is a very important person, the UN USA. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to JAXA for inviting us, and thank you, Chaki-san, for the introduction. So we are discussing about space for SDGs. Let's go back a little, one step back. So in September 2015, countries adopted a resolution that was put forward by the United Nations, adopting 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Why that happened? That shows that there is room for improvement. We have to do better as species. We are not doing as good as we should be doing. So that's why there are these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We are failing as species to ourselves. I mean, we have goals on gender equality. We have seen that the famines, instead of decreasing in the last couple of years, they are increasing. And we are also failing to the planet. We are failing to other species. We have SDGs on life below water. We have SDG on climate action. And we have to change that. The SDGs are not negative at all. Actually, they are saying that there is hope. And the hope is that we have set 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we are going to try to meet by 2030, and we are going to meet. What is happening? What space can do for the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, basically, a lot. I mean, my colleagues, my fellow panelists here were discussing several applications already of the space technology, mainly from the Earth observation arena to support the SDGs. It is true that space is a wonderful tool. Earth observation is providing reputable measurements, and you can replicate the way you're utilizing the satellites everywhere in the world, so you are sure that you are not cheating in the way you are counting things, because you can apply the same methodology on the same type of data everywhere in the world, and that's very interesting. We have talked a lot on Earth observation here, but there is more to the picture, and there is more that space can do, adding to the picture. There is telecommunication satellites, and there is GNSS. What is the Office for Outer Space Affairs doing in this respect? Well, the mandate of the office is to promote international cooperation for the peaceful uses of outer space. So we are in the right place, space and SDGs. The office is setting up a global partnership called Space for SDGs that is trying to get all these areas that I mentioned, because although they are doing very good, we have Earth observation, we have telecommunication, and we have GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems, that are doing very well, but the interconnection and the synergies that can be obtained from exploiting the different systems together are not fully exploited. So we have an opportunity there, and that's why we are setting up this partnership. I mean, CEOs, GEOs, they are doing very good. ICG for GNSS is doing very good, the International Committee on GNSS, ITU for the telecommunication satellites. So what we are going to try to provide is a forum of discussion to see what can we do together as a partnership. Also, the Office for Outer Space Affairs is putting together another initiative, because sometimes we are going to developing countries, and this is not to say that Sustainable Development Goals are for developing countries. It's for everybody, it's inclusive. Everybody has to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals for being successful. So sometimes when we are going to a developing country and we are asking them, well, what can I do for you? What are your needs? And the response that we are getting is that we don't know. Tell us what you have, and then we will tell you what you can do for me. So in that respect, we are putting together two tools. One is called the Space for Development Profile, which is basically measuring the space capabilities of a country. It's done on a bilateral basis, so there is no risk of trying to rank countries against each other. It's just to progress, to make that country helping progressing. The country can establish its own indicators according to their national priorities. And together with that, and to help to that country to improve in space capabilities, we are putting together, and this is an initiative that we are doing together with ESA, the Space Solution Compendium, which is answering that question that we are getting from countries. What do you have? So all the solutions that can potentially contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals are going to be there. So when a country is interested in Sustainable Development Goal number 1, no poverty, I'm interested to know what the space can do for that. He can go to a single place, to a single catalog, and can see the solutions there. That doesn't prevent that there are other catalogs around, but at least the countries know that there is one place, and then they can be linked to the other catalogs, and they can find the solutions that they want. We just want to be a broker, we just want to be an enabler, nothing else. There are other initiatives, and they are displayed there in the screen. One related to education, that was mentioned before. We have the regional centers, but we are trying to go a little step beyond. We want, SDGs are inclusive, so we want everybody to feel part of it. So we are creating a capacity building network, and we are trying to attract universities to contribute to the SDGs, to have even small initiatives, or big initiatives, it doesn't matter, but to have initiatives related to space that are contributing to the SDGs and are part of that network. So we can report back, we can acknowledge them as United Nations, and they can feel that recognition, and they are going to be working for the Sustainable Development Goals. So space can do really a lot for the Sustainable Development Goals, and it can be doing even more if we are working all together. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, everybody, for the presentation. Now we have learned about how Earth observation by satellite, or its utilization, and its data process and access for everybody is important, and that kind, and also education is important, and each activities will help the people's life on Earth, and also individual things is very, very good, and also we need somebody to organize the situation which UNOSA does, the United Nations UNOSA do. So while we are collecting some the questions and comments from the audience, the one thing that I would like to add is the dedication from the International Space Station and also the human spaceflight, because I work for that field, like medical research. As you know, International Space Station also dedicate for science, microgravity science, life science, many science, and also medical support from the Earth, which is basically telemedicine and telescience, and technology for living in space, like exploring the moon or the Mars, and education, of course. So the human spaceflight is also a lot of the parts that we can dedicate to SDGs. For example, if we, especially the space medicine, because the space medicine is basically the preventive medicine, because in space, the bone becomes 10 times more fragile, and muscle becomes 2 times faster deteriorated. So we have to prepare to prevent those bone and muscle deterioration from happening. So those information will also help the medicine on Earth. So I think we have quite a lot of possibilities from space communities, and we have a wonderful organization by UN-USA, so that we can do to achieve this SDGs dedication from space community. That's what I think. And then, while also there are several questions, so I can address the questions to the speakers. But amongst the speakers, do you have any questions to other speakers? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question for Joseph, because you just had a session just before this one focused on public-private partnerships, cooperation around data production from Earth observations, and the changing paradigm because of. And so one of the things that we've been struggling with at the country level is trying to think about public-private partnerships. And given the outcomes of the conversation that you had just previously, what did you learn through that conversation in terms of what that cooperation looks like, and what that also then means for how data is actually going to be applied and used in a way that it becomes more accessible to countries?
No, thank you. I think this is a very good question, and it's also something that is extremely important, because with all this data and information which is becoming available from not only our agency satellites but also the commercial initiatives, we just in the room next door we had a very interesting session to see how fast these new space players are coming on board, and how many of these satellites will be monitoring our planet not every 3 days or every 5 days, every hours, or sometimes more than hours. And this is really fascinating. I think there we are building up a capacity where you have a real monitoring of the state of the planet at all times. The question, of course, is how do you convert all these volumes of data into useful information? And there you need new methods, artificial intelligence, machine learning, to really derive those parameters that are useful in order to, at the end, preserve our own planet. And this is a challenge which will come, a huge challenge. It goes way beyond space agencies. It involves IT companies, many other players in the applications domain, and this is something where I think we have very, very exciting times ahead, but we may not believe it, but we're just at the beginning of this trend which goes extremely fast.
Okay, and this is not a question, and a request to you. And maybe you remember that I mentioned about the importance of the role of the UN regional centers. And actually, I myself prepared 2 additional PowerPoint. But using that, would you please give them status or your plan about that shortly?
The slide? Okay. Could you just bring up the Dr. Kibe's slide? That's what you want? Okay. And which one? The appendix. Go to the appendix part.
So we have, for those of you that don't know the UN regional centers for space and technology, for science and technology, they are located in we have, United Nations got the mandate, the Office for Outer Space got the mandate of creating regional centers that are going to be, or there are, because they are already established, centers for excellence in space science and technology education. We have created together with them curricula for teaching the students, and they are located in different places in the world. That's what they are doing today. We have plans for them in the coming years, but these are plans that have to be approved by the member states of the Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space. We are thinking in creating an alliance of regional centers where they are sharing experiences and they are collaborating with data exchange, with experience exchange, because that at the moment is not very well developed. So we are moving forward, and we are trying to make them work more together, closely together. And what we want is that they become regional hubs for developing on space education and technology. So that's the plan that we have for them initially, but this has a huge potential and it will evolve a lot. On the other side, the other initiative that I mentioned, the capacity building network, it's open to everybody. It's open to all the institutions that wants to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of space. So wherever, no matter the program, how big or small it is, it can contribute. So it can be part of the capacity building network, and it can be recognized being part of this capacity building network by the United Nations. So,
yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I pointed out the importance of these activities. And I always believe that every space agencies should contribute more actively to this activities. I think that's all.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very heating discussions. And also we have a young student to the questions to Alan about NASA. So what is NASA doing to prevent climate changes? NASA's activities for preventing climate changes.
So I'll have to say first that I don't think NASA can prevent climate change, but what we're doing is maximizing all of the capability that we have to collect the data to indicate that the changes. We have models that show how the surface of the Earth, the temperature has risen over the last number of years. And with that data and analysis, including in the upper atmosphere where we can find chemicals that are indicating that there is some industrial type of reactions in the upper atmosphere that contribute to climate change. We can only provide the data. We need to have the public, folks like you, to be able to take that data and be able to move forward and use it to make changes in the way we live so that we can protect the Earth and hopefully, slow down some of this climate change that we're seeing.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Could I maybe just add one sentence, because I think the question has a bit of a political connotation behind as well. What can NASA do these days on climate change? One thing I really want to say is that what NASA is doing is fantastic, is essential in order to monitor the planet in a proper way. There's not one agency, one country who can monitor the planet. It's America, it's Japan, it's China, it's India, it's Europe. It's all mixed together. And NASA is a very important member of this community in order to provide observations, but not only observations, the interpretation of this data on derived climate parameters. And I really would like to stress and underline that for everyone here, NASA is a very important partner, and I hope this continues.
And I just wanted to add is that what we need to do, we have the data and it's available, but if you're interested in assessing and analyzing any of the data, please get with me and I will help you get connected with it because that's the interpreting the data is where it's very extremely important and we need everybody that's interested to be able to participate in that.
Great, thank you. There is a specific questions to Stuart from the Australian student. How environment resource science student can be involved to contribute to SDGs?
So the SDG framework, there are many ways that those contributions can be brought forward. So some of the measurement of the SDGs will rely on citizen science, for example, and contributions, voluntary contributions by members of the public in doing some of these measurements, in analysing data from countries that don't have the resources to do it themselves. And there's real opportunity also for students that are coming through the system to recognise that this challenge is not going to go away by 2030. We've set a goal to meet the goals of the Sustainable Development by 2030, but I don't think many of us actually think we're going to get to all of them, and there's going to need to be further development from that point forward. So what I would encourage you to do, if you're interested in being involved, is to look at developing your career in areas of importance, as highlighted by the Sustainable Development Goals, in the space sector, in Earth observations, in developing approaches to agriculture or to food security or to health. So it really is something that the Sustainable Development Goals are set there as a light on the hill that we all have to put our shoulder behind achieving, and everyone has a role to play in that.
Good. Thank you very much. So the specific questions to Aditya about the question is, would you think it's a good approach to bring non-space private companies as the third party to use space to contribute to SDGs? What do you think?
The question is getting more private sector engagement.
Especially non-space related stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, I think the private sector has a huge role to play in regards to the SDGs. Arguably, trying to figure out that model in terms of what those public-private partnerships look like in regards to how private sector is really able to provide their contributions to the SDGs is something that I think we're all working out. But there's a number of things that a number of different companies are doing in this space right now. I think part of what we're really trying to promote at a country level is how do you create an ecosystem approach for how the SDGs are implemented. And just going back to the previous point, citizen engagement in response to how the SDGs are going to be achieved is a huge part of the formula there. And so there's a number of different things in which in ways that happens, of which the private sector is definitely a big player. So going back to Stuart's discussion also in terms of data cubes, thinking about how private sector, what they're really good at is being able to take a particular problem and being able to scale it, innovate, and build entrepreneurship around it. And so when you have data that is becoming more and more accessible, of which the private sector obviously has some of that data, but also trying to get private sector to engage more with public data in a way that you're able to innovate around it.
Thank you very much. So the time is running, so the last question to everybody. Maybe briefly, please reply to this. So what are the major challenges and also the difficulties to make your suggestions to SDGs happen? Maybe starting from ISA, the organization will be the last, I guess, the UN.
Okay, I will be very fast. I think the major challenge is to establish an international global network that really works and works together, and that we are all in a harmonized way addressing the various indicators which can be measured from space.
Thank you.
In our experience, a few of the major issues are funding and capacity. To achieve the SDGs, it's going to require lots of investment. And then the other part is really looking at institutional cooperation in multiple levels. So having government agencies working together, but then also opening up that space such that private sector and citizens are able to better engage with government.
And I'm going to say that with all of the work that you and USA has done, I think that one of the challenges is to get that visibility and get the support for all the actions and work that you're doing, because I think that's where it's starting. You've got some great ideas and we need to move out on those.
Yes, and maybe you remember that I proposed that very future IS in Southeast Asian area. Yes, actually I know that, and Vietnam showed a strong intention to host that. And once, and maybe as far as I remember, Thailand made a bid, but no IS in that. Of course, and as I told you before, just before coming here, I investigated the situation closely in each countries, and maybe they are emerging, but still at the very early stage of space development. So maybe they have some kind of limitation to host this kind of big, prestigious event. But in that case, and you know that the regional alliance, for example, ASEAN or APSCO, APRSA, such kind of regional alliance should play a key role to realize my dream. Okay.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot this week about what wonderful cooperation there is in space. It's a lot harder on the surface of the Earth to get that cooperation and collaboration, perhaps because it's not rocket science, right? It's actually cooperation, collaboration, relationships between countries that make it difficult, and perhaps we can learn from the cooperation we do have in the space sector to achieve greater cooperation on the surface of the planet for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
So the thing that I can add, because colleague panelists have already said the most difficult parts. I mean, we need, there is the need for funding, there is the need for collaborating more together, and I would like to stress that last one, as Joseph was saying. I mean, we need to work together. If we are working together, problems like funding will be less of a problem, because we can confront policy making and decision makers together. We can get streamline the funding. If we are working together, we can put better solutions in place. It's not only about telecommunications, it's not only about desausation, it's about combining the knowledge, even technology. I mean, there are wonderful experiments running the ISS that could help to provide water in places where there is no water, and that could help in solving poverty issues. So this collaboration, these synergies have to be fully exploited, because it is true that there is a lack of resources, and it's difficult to obtain resources, but on the other hand, we have tools that have not been fully exploited, and we have to do that. We have to fully exploit what we already have.
So thank you very much. It's a good suggestions. We need global network, funding, and organizational support, and ISC, which has never happened in Asian areas, so we have to work together to have some ISC or Asian alliance, and cooperation and collaboration. That's kind of a thing. Basically, we have to recognize SDGs, learn about more, and work together. That is, I think, the suggestion. And the good thing is that here in the audience, there are a lot of young, promising students, as well as influential people to this community. So I think players are here, so we can work together. So thank you very much. This is the last kind of slide, but I believe all space-related issues which living organisms like us, including human beings and plants and anything, are involved. We can always expect the Earth benefit from space. So thus, we will promote even more to connect space to society via SDGs. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming to this session. And if you have more questions, I hope that the speakers will have a little bit more time to maybe talk to you on the floor. So thank you for coming, and have a nice evening.